absolutely have a fair trial, even after huge amounts of publicity. And the trial, for example, of the doctor who treated Michael Jackson, who received wall-to-wall, week after week, publicity, even dwarfing what we've seen in this example. Or indeed the case most recently in this country of Kevin Spacey, who was exceptionally high profile, went through the media ringer and then some, and was, of course, acquitted, which I think demonstrates the worth of the system. The point is this: juries, if the Crown Prosecution Service in this country would have to review the evidence and think it was more likely to secure a conviction than not, or, pragmatically, now that I'm no longer in practice, I can say honestly, felt they had to. In either way, they would then bring a case, and the jury in such a case would be instructed by the judge to disregard what they had heard or read about the case in the past and focus solely and wholly only on the evidence that was presented before them. And I must tell you that, in my experience at least, jurors take that very seriously, and we've got a good system that produces people who pay attention and treat that responsibility with the weight it deserves. And as I say, only this year we've seen Kevin Spacey acquitted of things that people in the media repeated again and again and again.
And of course, and I'm going to come on to the PR brand aspects in a second with you, but of course, you talk about Kevin Spacey's brand, personal brand, professional brand was absolutely battered, and we'll come on to that in a second. It's all well and good saying, Alex, talking about the process as it is. You know, jurors essentially forget everything that you've seen and read and all the rest of it, and now when you enter this room, your mind is a blank piece of paper. People are not robots.
No, but it worked. I mean, the Kevin Spacey example was an absolute classic of where he had been found guilty in the court of public opinion. Undoubtedly, he'd been found guilty in the media. When it came to a trial, he was acquitted. Right, and that was it, because the jury listened to the arguments, they listened to the evidence, and they acquitted him. It was, and the judge makes sure that this happens, and will say, yes, when he sums up or she sums up, will say, you know, these are the things to go away and think about. So everybody does their best to make sure there is a fair trial. But the thing about Russell Brand is, leaving aside the allegations, I mean, if you just have to listen to what he was doing, what he was saying, and I mean, the way he talked about women, the way he treated women. I mean, the classic was, I mean, it was just awful, actually, on any level, of when he rang up somebody to say that he'd been having sex with
Was this the Andrew Sachs thing?
Yes, say he'd been having...
Yeah, and he lost his job as a consequence of that.
Yeah, but that's the sort of attitude he had. I mean,
British people aren't
we know
stupid. People are very sensible, I think, in this country, and they are able properly to separate out the fact that they find somebody repellent, as I have found Russell Brand for many years, from the question of whether or not they are guilty of a criminal offence. And of course, he denies all of the allegations against him. And I'm sure that were he to go, it may be difficult to bring a trial for reasons people may change their mind about willingness to give evidence, the length of time that's passed, and so forth. None of those things mean you can't bring a case. They may make it more difficult. Doesn't mean you can't. But I have every confidence, to answer the question you were asking, he could receive a fair trial, whatever people think of him, and including the wider views that they've formed about him and whether they like him or not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that Kevin Spacey's jury was not full of people who liked...
Who were massive Kevin Spacey fans,
Because actually you are... If you are... I mean, I've covered court cases with juries where it has been very difficult, and you listen to the judge, and the jury does take it very, very seriously.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think there's something about, I don't know, the way that a lot of the media does kind of behave in these examples. And yes, you know what? There'll be people that say, like what you said, oh, you know, I found him repulsive for years and whatever, and people won't like him, and each their own, you know. You can like him if you like him, don't like him if you don't like him. I knew him for a period of time back in my post-apprentice life, and I actually thought he was all right, you know. So I don't share this repulsion. But one of the things I don't like is the way that the media kind of... I almost feel like they're dying out. They're there showing his house, which I really disagree with. That's a family home.
That part, I think, is awful. I bear in mind, of course, he's got young children too. I think showing people's private homes is appalling, whether it's the Prime Minister of the day having people clamber over its roof, or the person accused of the latest set of allegations of which they may or may not be guilty, and have robustly refuted them themselves. I think it's quite wrong to show people's personal homes and so forth.
Yeah, and I mean, if you do think it's right, I mean, how would you feel if someone made allegations against you and all of a sudden your kid's home was on telly? I wouldn't like it much, I can tell you. What about politicians? There's been a lot of criticism about Ed Miliband. I can show a little clip of it. Ed Miliband got quite cosy with Russell Brand, and people are criticising now the Labour Party and Ed Miliband for that. Do you think politicians, they do kind of desperately try and attach themselves to whoever is popular in popular culture at that point in time in order to curry favour and get votes?
They always do. I mean, it's who are the celebrities who will support a particular party. I mean, it's true of all parties. I mean, obviously, Labour and the Conservatives have the most because they're going to get power, whereas, frankly, the Lib Dems and Greens are not. But it's always gone on, and it is always high risk. And Russell Brand, even at the time, was clearly high risk, and even when he was extremely popular, he wasn't popular with a lot of the media.
Separated out from the question of Russell Brand and consider the broader question you were asking is about the politics and celebrity. Very difficult to find a prominent politician from the late 1970s and 1980s who didn't have a picture taken with Jimmy Savile. Very difficult to find a politician taken who didn't, when offered the opportunity, have a photo op with Stuart Hall. Now, these are people who legacy has shown were absolutely guilty of heinous crimes. And some of the worst imaginable. And yet, politicians who didn't know that at the time happily, of course, had their photos taken, and I don't blame them for that anymore. Look, I'm a Conservative. I don't blame Ed Miliband for a moment for being in photographs with a prominent celebrity of the day. It's inevitably what politicians do.
Let me tap into your other area of expertise, because not just being a barrister, you're a man of many talents.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
But not just a barrister. You are also a PR guru, for short. And I wonder, when allegations get made about people to this extent in the public domain, if those allegations are to be found, not to be true or whatever, do you think, or actually, even in the case that we're in right now, can someone revive their brand?
They can. Of course, it's up to a point, right? Because part of the trouble we've seen, and this is true well beyond this issue, the wheels of the criminal justice system don't just turn slowly, they turn increasingly slowly as time has gone on. And Spacey had to wait for some years before facing... I know that coronavirus played a role in that, but had to take an enormous amount of time.
And he lost... I mean, he lost a lot of parts.
Well,
I mean, he was absolutely...
Not only does that happen, but attitudes harden towards you. And if you emerge out the other side and you've been acquitted, there'll be plenty of people who will still say, well, there's no smoke without fire, I won't touch you. So I don't think allegations of this sort help anyone's brand at all. Of course, the media has always liked a bad boy. The rock idols of the 1960s trashing hotel rooms and taking relatively mild, in comparison with today, amounts of drugs and playing away sexually. The media quite liked that. Allegations like this, much more difficult to recover from.